Hey, welcome to Brian for Liberty. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about the Freedom Truckers, how they're being labeled and treated by the media, as well as the ongoing issue with their GoFundMe page, and what I think is a pretty significant amount of hypocrisy, but more importantly, something that we have to keep an eye on as we move forward in the era of digital currencies, with our own Federal Reserve and central banks around the world talking about digital currencies as the way of the future. Thanks for coming by, Brian for Liberty, and stay tuned. So by now, unless you're living under a rock, you're pretty familiar with what's going on in Canada with the Freedom Truckers, the massive protests taking place in Ottawa. I've talked about it before, and some media reports initially were talking about a few hundred trucks, a few hundred people. It's very clear now that we're talking about tens of thousands of trucks, potentially 100,000 protesters. Trudeau in Canada attempting to actually bring the military in, the military refusing. It's really turning into a real mess in Canada. I want to talk about a couple of things kind of outside of maybe the main headlines of this whole thing. The first is just how they're being treated by the media. This really disturbs me. It's an ongoing attempt by certain media outlets to take anyone who would disagree with a particular narrative and smear them and label them in a specific kind of way to drive a negative reaction from the general public. So we're going to take a look at this headline from the New York Post. GoFundMe severs ties with Canadian anti-vax trucker rally, withholds $10 million in donations. So GoFundMe severs ties with Canadian anti-vax trucker rally. We'll start there. If GoFundMe doesn't want to do business with these truckers, that's fine, I guess. That's their private platform. They can do whatever they want. I think it's wrong for them to do that, but that's fine. And they withheld $10 million in donations. Now, if they didn't want to do business with these people, what they should have done is not allow donations in the first place. They shouldn't have set it up. But let's get into the story here a little bit. A prominent fundraising site cut ties with a convoy of Canadian truckers that had descended on their nation's capital to protest COVID-19 vaccine mandates and regulations. GoFundMe blocked the release of almost $10 million in donations to the Freedom Convoy Friday in connection with the promotion of violence and harassment in Ottawa. We now have evidence from law enforcement that the previously peaceful demonstrations has become an occupation, with police reports of violence and other unlawful activity, the website wrote in a statement. Donors had 2 weeks to ask for a refund, and the rest of the money the group raised would be allocated to credible and established charities chosen by Freedom Convoy organizers, the site said. Thousands of truckers, let me get this out of here. Thousands of truckers rolled into Ontario City on January 29th, many of them blocking roads outside of Parliament buildings, honking loudly and brandishing Canadian flags and expletive-deleted Prime Minister Justin Trudeau banners. Police were bracing for a surge of protesters joining their ranks this weekend and said the situation was increasingly volatile and increasingly dangerous. The hatred, the violence, the illegal acts that Ottawa residents and businesses have endured over the last week is unacceptable in any circumstance, Ottawa Police Chief Peter Slowly reportedly said. Do not bring weapons, do not bring firearms, do not come here to cause harm, do not come here to break the law. You will be held to account. Slowly also said he was among city officials who had received death threats from protesters, according to the report. On Wednesday, Facebook took down a page created by U.S. truckers who were planning to ride from California to Washington, D.C. for a similar protest. The Convoy to D.C. 2022 page was taken down for violating the social network's policy against sharing QAnon conspiracy theories, according to Fox News. I'm going to touch on that. It's a little off topic real quick, but I just want to touch on this. The QAnon, if you're not familiar with it, is this insane theory about child sacrifice, and I mean, it's horrible. Look into it yourself. Be cautious with it. It's going to be pretty brutally descriptive. But conspiracy theory is a phrase that was created by the CIA, and it's interesting to me that the QAnon conspiracy came about at this time when a multi-billionaire sex trafficker who obviously was trafficking minors and obviously had ties to billionaires and politicians, the royal family. All of a sudden, there's this QAnon theory, and it's interesting that took place at the same time. If you read the history of where the phrase conspiracy theory came from, and you look what's going on with Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, and when the QAnon conspiracy theory stuff started and Pizzagate and all that started, it's almost as if it was designed to make sure that anybody who tried to talk about the sex trafficking and these horrible things that are happening at the highest levels were immediately put into this conspiracy theory group of QAnon. Anyway, that's just a little aside I wanted to throw in there quick. But the Convoy to DC 22 page taken down for violating the social network's policy. Organizer Brian Brace told the outlet his group wanted to end U.S. vaccine mandates through peaceful protest. This crosses all genders, all races, all sexual orientations, all occupations. Truckers might be standing up, but it's not about the truckers, it's about America. So first, let me just say this. When we start at the beginning of this article, we're talking about GoFundMe anti-vax truckers. Anti-vax. Anybody who disagrees with a particular narrative is going to be labeled as anti-vax. And the reason for that is we need to make sure that we categorize these people. There are plenty of people in this country right now who take the phrase anti-vax and tie it to hardcore, far-right, Trump-supporting, white supremacists. They've tied all this together so that they can use anti-vax, and then they can just throw all these other things along with it. If somebody says I'm anti-vax, or that person's anti-vax, or this organization is anti-vax, we've been programmed to say, oh, they're anti-vax, they're anti-science, they are racist, they're white supremacists, they're far right-wing extremists. If we made it to tie all that stuff to anti-vax. What anti-vax only means one thing. It means one thing and one thing only. We oppose mandated vaccination. I don't think that's an extremist position. I don't think it's extremist to say I don't want the government to force me to inject something into my body. To label that as an extremist position, to me, is very disingenuous. It sets up a very dangerous precedent of what it means to oppose government power and government authority. I'm opposed to being forced to take a vaccine, and therefore I'm a racist, I'm a white supremacist, I'm all these horrible things, which means what am I allowed to oppose from the government? What am I allowed to say no to without being labeled as all of these things? That's a dangerous way to talk about people who are literally just trying to stand in the way of government mandates. There's not a mention in here of how many of these truckers are actually vaccinated. I guarantee you some of these truckers are already vaccinated. I guarantee you some of these protesters are already vaccinated. I've come across on social media plenty of people who are fully vaccinated and boosted and still don't support mandates. It can be two different things. And I can tell you right now, I will say it, I'm not vaccinated. I may get vaccinated at some point in the future. I'm a relatively healthy person. I take pretty good care of myself. I'm 46 years old, so I don't consider myself at significantly high risk based on my weight, my physical condition, my age. At some point, I might get vaccinated. The fact that I'm not vaccinated doesn't make me anti-vaccine. I'm not trying to stop anyone from getting vaccinated. If you feel like in your mind the vaccine provides you with a level of protection that you need to feel safe and secure and to be around the people you care about and prevent them from getting ill, if you feel that's the best course for you, then go get vaccinated. Telling you that I don't want the government to mandate something does not mean that I am opposed to that thing. So let's separate that. And it also shouldn't ascribe any other beliefs to me. It shouldn't automatically mean that, oh, well, he's this, so he also believes all these other things. Okay. So let's stop grouping one belief and let's take each person's belief system, each issue, one thing at a time and break it down that way. I think it's very disingenuous to say anti-vax because I think we know what we're attempting to tie that to. As far as GoFundMe is concerned, let me just go here and get into this. This is Black Lives Matter Los Angeles. So this is a little bit older. This is a little bit, but when I talk about hypocrisy, this is what I'm getting at here. Black Lives Matter Los Angeles is the original chapter of the global movement built to challenge the state-sanctioned violence against black people and to vision and build a just and free society. Now, I'm not going to get into all of what I believe or don't believe from Black Lives Matter. That's not the purpose of this particular video. What I am going to say is I think it's awfully hypocritical when they've got $3 million. This is GoFundMe also supported Black Lives Matter and allowed them to raise money through there. And there's not a question of the violence that became associated with the Black Lives Matter protest. You can't question it. You could say that it wasn't Black Lives Matter. You could say it was troublemakers. But the bottom line is the protests themselves were being used as a way for certain, if you want to say certain bad actors, to get in there and be incredibly violent. So for GoFundMe to say that this trucker protest, and because of the violations of the law being associated with them, GoFundMe doesn't want to do business with them, but allowed Black Lives Matter organizations to fundraise through them, despite the massive amount of violence and personal property destruction and death that was associated with those protests, is incredibly hypocritical. And it teaches us a very important lesson moving forward. And that lesson is that you better figure out how to exchange currency and money and goods and services outside of the mainstream. Whether it's cryptocurrency, which I don't have a ton of faith in, to be honest with you, because of the amount of control government now has over the internet and over the digital world. I am very skeptical that cryptocurrency can provide the level of safety and security and freedom that people think it will. But the fact of the matter is that we're going to get to a place where I disagree with you, you're wrong, and I'm going to be able to shut off your funding. Where your bank might be able to your bank might be able to do it to you, your ISP might be able to do it to you, the government itself might be able to do it to you. Where all of your currency, how much of what you earn is in a safe in your house versus in a third-party institution that is only represented to you in a digital format. This is how much money I have because this is what my digital format tells me that I have. This is incredibly dangerous, and the bottom line is that if you will lose your ability to provide for yourself if you are not able to engage in commerce outside of these entities. I know this is GoFundMe. I know it's a private entity, but the line from a private entity saying we're not going to do business with you to government saying you have to deplatform this person. We're already seeing that. We're already seeing pressure from the government to deplatform people who are speaking. The next thing is going to be forcing financial institutions to say we can't allow certain people to be doing business, to be engaging in commerce. So you better start figuring out a way to be able to engage in business and conduct commerce outside of your standard mainstream entities, your standard mainstream banks and institutions that you're used to doing business with, because at any given moment, that could become a very unreliable source for you if you are not falling in line, if you oppose the state, if you oppose the predominant narrative, that may not be a possibility for you anymore. So it's very important to get fiscally sound so that you can continue to engage in commerce in the event that something like that should happen. So thank you very much for sticking around for the whole video. Like, subscribe, and share the content to support the channel, and I will see you next time.